Today, we are going to show you how to convert your PCM to have Apple CarPlay. I'm Justin.
And I am Aaron.
And today we have Cousin Rob's Cayenne here, and you'll see Cousin Tom shortly. And Tom has figured out a way to convert the stock PCM 3.1 radio to have CarPlay on it.
Yeah, that's fantastic, especially because it is wireless CarPlay, which is really nice.
And it's very expensive to put a new radio in one of these because there is that PCM part of it and everything kind of runs through it. You just don't go down to Earmark and throw no radio in that thing.
Yeah, and I'm always kind of nervous working on a car like this, pulling a radio out of the dash. I really don't want to mess up the dash because then it gets really expensive. Right. So Tom has done this before. He's going to show us the right way to do it so that you can do it to your Cayenne or even maybe your 997 if you are so inclined.
Let's go.
Let's
get started.
All right, so today we have Cousin Tom back with us, and he is going to help us with our Apple CarPlay project. So Tom, before we start any project, we need to make sure we have all the right tools. What are the tools for this job?
So the tools required are you need two small flat blade screwdrivers because they need to go inside the vents to pop the two clips. You're going to need a Torx kit so you can remove the 4 Torx bolts. And that's really most of what you need to get the radio out.
Okay, beyond that, we're going to need the part.
Yeah, so we're going to be installing a Mr. 12 volt Apple CarPlay Android Auto kit that will go inside the radio, which will make it look like a factory install.
Excellent. Well, let's get started. What is the first step in this project?
The first step is to remove the 2 front vents around the radio.
Excellent. Let's get at it.
All right, so the first thing you should do is get a towel. So you put a towel here so it doesn't scratch any of your interior when you remove the radio. The second thing you need to do is make sure you have 2 small standard blade screwdrivers and make sure the bit is very small because it's going to have to go inside the vent. So on the 3rd rung up, there's going to be clips. So 1, 2, 3. There's 2 small black clips in here. And you take your screwdrivers and you put them inside the clips. All right, so once you have the screwdrivers in here, you actually can pull the clips out like this, and then from here it will release this vent, and the vent just comes out like this. Now there's a wire connected to the vent right here for the climate control system, so you need to disconnect this wire and it should just pull free like so, and then just put it somewhere where it's out of the way. Don't put it down by your feet because you might step on it. And then the second vent is the same way. Okay, now we're done. There are 4 Torx bolts that hold the radio in. 1, 2, 3, 4. It takes a T27 Torx bit to remove these 4 screws. And it's always good to have a cup to hold all of your screws in so they don't get lost. Okay, after you're done with that, put the screws somewhere where they don't get knocked over. Move all of this out of the way, and you have to put the car into neutral, or you won't be able to get the radio all the way out. So now that we have the car out of park to give us enough room to move the radio back, place a clean towel over your controls so you don't scratch your buttons, and just pull the radio straight forward. And it comes out just like this. So there's a harness back here that you remove, right? This harness right here, you remove it, and it will cut the power to the radio. And you have to press it and pull it. And out it comes. And then now you have a little bit more access. Then you have to proceed to pull all the different antennas. And you actually may have more or less antennas depending on the options in your car. And you press these little tabs with a flathead screwdriver, and off they come. And the last of this black one's actually on the side. And now, out comes the radio.
So we have the Cayenne radio out, and we have our part that we are going to install, the Mr. 12 volt kit. You can order this from ACS. We'll link to that down below, but you're gonna get the Mr. 12 volt kit and also this extra bag of parts. It's going to have to be installed in the Cayenne radio. It's going to take apart. We're going to take a lot of screws out. That's why we have our screw cup right here. You need to know whether your hardware is version 3.0 or 3.1. This is a version 3.1, so we have the right part for that. And now Tom is going to start taking this apart and installing this part so we can show you exactly how it's done.
So the radio's out. We're going to turn it upside down so we can access and remove this panel as needed. You're going to need 2 things. You're going to need a T8 Torx and a flatbed. flat blade. You use the flat blade to take off this little extra plastic cover here. And you lift up these 2 pins and off it comes. That allows you to access these 2 screws. So now we take the T8 and we remove this screw, this screw, this screw, and this screw. All right, so we remove the 2 screws from the top, and now we remove the screws right here. And it's always good to have some sort of soft surface to work on so you don't scratch the front of your unit. Okay, once you have the screws out, you turn the radio with the top side down, and then you pull this cover off. So you need to remove this cover, and it could be a little bit difficult to remove. Gently pry with a small flat blade screwdriver here at the top to pull it away a little bit. Because the trick is we have to actually remove this tape here, which is preventing it from moving. So score this tape. There might be another piece of tape on the other side. On this one, there is not. It's like after you remove all the screws, you need to pop these. There's 2 clips, one here and one on this side. And then once those clips are out, this should just slide right back, like so. So you slide it back and you lift it up very, very carefully. Be very careful about this ribbon cable. It's very delicate. If you break this ribbon cable, your DVD drive will not work. So the heart of the kit is we're going to be installing a small daughter board inside of here. These 2 ribbon cables will connect to that daughter board. The daughter board looks like this. Okay, so now that we have this apart, we need to remove these three screws so that we can put standoffs so the daughter board will actually clear the XM radio board. If you don't have an XM radio board, you actually will need to use a different size standoff. All right, so we have 2 different standoffs that come with the kit. You have the shorter brass ones and you have the longer black ones. If you don't have the XM board in here, you'll use the shorter brass ones. If you have the XM board, you need to use the longer plastic ones. So now we're going to remove these 3. So we have 1, 2, 3. So we'll remove the first one, and it's always good to have a nice magnetic small screwdriver. So we'll remove the last one, and then we change the bit, and now we're going to put the black standoffs in. And the standoffs are so that the daughter board can actually clear this antenna connector. If you didn't have standoffs and you just laid it in there, it would actually short out your radio and the daughter board. The black standoff, plastic standoffs, do not over tighten them or you'll strip them out. So once you put it in the standoffs, the first thing you want to do is do a test fit. So you just lay this here and make sure it actually clears this board here. And you can tell if it's laying on the standoffs or it's laying on the antenna mount. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to remove these 2 ribbon cables and be very gentle because these are quite delicate. And the way you remove them is you actually pop up each one, and once they click, don't move them any further, you'll pull them completely off. So out comes the first cable. And out comes the second cable. So those 2 cables will be connecting into this daughter board. The wide one goes in here, the skinny one goes in here. And then we'll have other cables that will actually go from here into the ones removed. So this puts it inside the data bus of the radio. So you take the first connector that comes with the kit, you stick it in here until it stops. Press it until it stops, and it needs to be even. So you should have the equal amount of color showing. And if you do, then you gently hold it so it doesn't move, and then you press the connector back down. And as I said before, be very gentle because these can break very easily. But you see now it's locked in, and you can see we have an equal amount of blue showing. And then we do the second cable. Okay, so that's completed. The next thing we need to do is these 2 will go over this way, and these 2 will go under this way. So the next step is we need to remove this panel here, which is actually will give us access because we're going to have to route a wire through this hole. Okay, so once this is loose, you take this wire, that's part of the kit. You take the small white end and you feed it through this hole. And be very gentle with it so you don't break anything. And then you take this white piece and you're going to plug it into this connector on the board. And this piece is keyed, so you can't put it on wrong. But just for, if it's the silver pin side up. And it's okay to pull a little bit through extra, because then you can pull the excess out when you're done actually connecting it, because it is a tight fit. Yeah, so make sure that it's seated good. And then the next thing you're going to do is use a wire wrap tie. And you put it through this hole. And you put it through this hole. And it's going to act to hold that cable connected in there into the daughter board. So now that we have the this wire tie installed, just cut the excess off. And then we're ready to put the daughter board in here and pulling the excess out. Not too tight, but just enough so that it's not bunched up in here. And then line up the standoff screws. So you have to install the 3 standoff screws so that the board is properly mounted. And do not over tighten them, because we're putting these into plastic standoffs. And be careful on the very last screw not to pinch the cable. So there will be a very short standoff in the kit. And it actually goes here where the original screw went. Make sure that the standoff is snug. Go back to your Torx bit and then take the XM antenna piece, if you have one, and screw it into the standoff. Okay, that's done. See, it's nice and solid. You don't want this floating around, because it could easily break off the XM antenna connector. So the next step is to pull all these up here on the daughter board that you've installed, and you take the large one and you put it in there, and then apply pressure to this. But make sure you actually use your finger on the bottom side of the board when you're pressing down, because it's not supported by a standoff. And as we said before, make sure that you have an equal amount of color showing once you've locked these into place. And then you take the blue extension cord, the one that comes from the motherboard, into the daughter board. Okay, now double check that you have all of these even on both sides. And now the daughter board is installed. Now you're ready to reassemble the radio. Carefully, so you don't pull the ribbon cable off of the DVD drive. And also being careful with these two, because they do stick up a little bit. Kind of push them down a little bit, because you don't want to snag the cables either. And what we want to do is, when we're putting it back together, we want to align this tab with this spot right here on both sides. And see, now it's actually aligned. And it should just go right in. And making sure that it's flush, that the drive is flush with the chassis of the radio. And then you can turn the radio back on its face and you just gently push. Okay, now you're ready to put the screws back in. It's always best to put the 3 back screws in first to help push the radio flush with the front of the display. Okay, once you have the 3 on the back, then we still have the 2 on the top here. And then you put in the last screw here. You may have to press gently on the front of the radio to get the screw holes lined up for those last 2 screws. All right, once that's done, then you put the plastic piece that you had removed before, and it just snaps in. And now your radio is back reassembled. Okay, so now the radio portion is done. We put the daughter board in the radio. The next step is we're going to modify the wiring harness, and we're not going to make any cuts, but we need to move a few connections around. But before we started, we actually put blue tape down here to protect the finish here on the console so that we don't scratch it up. And it's always good also to take the towel and stuff it under here just to protect everything. So we are going to actually be popping off this optical connector right here. We're going to pull this out. We're also going to take this connector off. This connector will actually end up plugging into here, so we have an inline Y into the optical bus. And this is what's unique about this kit, is it does not convert from analog to digital. It stays digital, so the sound quality is preserved. So now that we begin, we go here. We're going to pop this off, and then we pop it off by moving this little tab out that's here. And then this should just gently, because this is a glass cable inside of here, and out it comes. So now that we have that off, we're going to take this connector off right here. So then this part that you've taken out and you've moved the connector over, you take it and you plug it into this Y. The part that you've taken the previous cover off actually goes into this extra harness that we come here, and this is a Y harness. So this portion will go into the back of the radio, and this portion will go into the original car harness. And then the way you can tell the difference is this actually has the 2 holes for the optical, and this one does not. So then we take this, and you plug it into the last 2, and push it until it clicks. So now you can actually take this, and you take these 2, and you can press them together. And then gently making sure that you don't bend any of these pins. And then press them together, and then you move this up and it will lock. And make sure it's good and flush, and then it locks just like that. All right, we're done with that portion now, and now we need to route these wires and this optical cable down to here through this, and we're going to install the outboard box, and there's a void in here. So now we have to route this cable down through the dash so that we can actually plug it into the auxiliary box, and we'll show the auxiliary box later. So the easiest way to do it is there is enough space to go back behind here.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so right here we actually fished the wires from the harness through here, and if you go behind the vent, it actually you actually have enough space to actually pull this through here. Now we're not going to leave this wiring here. Ultimately this wiring will be under this panel right here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is actually the long cable that we put on the radio, we also need to fish through the same place. And when that's through, then we can actually bring the box in that we're going to be installing and put it on here, and then do a test fit. All right, the next step is you know, the cable that we installed into the radio, we're actually going to have to route that the same way. But to do that again, we're going to have to take the transmission and put it into neutral. So now that we've done that, we need to make sure that we put this here so you do not scratch up your console. And you can balance the radio right here, and then feed these cables to the same path that you use for the other cables. So now that we have the cables run through, then you take this one black cable and you plug it into here. And you do that so it doesn't get pulled back inside, and push it till it clicks. And now we're ready to actually install the auxiliary box. So this is the Mr. 12 volt auxiliary box that actually does all the magic. This is what adds Apple CarPlay and Android Auto to your PCM 3.1 radio in your Porsche. So remove the plastic so it doesn't overheat. You take this white connector and you plug it into the back. You take this connector with the white cable and you plug it into the white cable. And then you actually take the optical connector and you remove this plug and you plug the optical connector into it. And right now we're just doing a test fit to make sure it all works before we put it all back together. All right, here's the cable that we're going to put in. Make sure that you have, it comes in a lock position and you have to unlock it just like before when we locked it, and it actually goes onto the back. It only goes on one way. Press it so it's tight and then click the lock. And now we're actually going to turn the car on to make sure that everything works, and make sure it still boots up, making sure that your towel is here. And you press source, and now you have a TV source that you didn't have before. And if you see this, you have successfully installed all the wiring to the Mr. 12 volt box. And now all we're going to do is we're going to reinstall everything now that we've confirmed that it works, tidy this away, and then we'll go into how to reassemble the head unit and the vents, and then pairing your phone to the Apple CarPlay. Okay, now that we've actually we've tested the radio, that it functions, it boots up Mr. 12 volt and into CarPlay, it's time to start to reinstall everything. So now the first thing we have to do is actually install all the different antennas that this head unit has. And it's nice that they're actually color coded. So blue goes to blue, black goes to black, Olive goes to olive. And as you press them in, you'll hear them click to know that they're actually connected. There. So now they're all connected. So now we have to fish these wires in here. And the nice thing about the Cayenne is it actually has a nice void back here that you can actually put this extra connector back in, which will allow us to more easily slide the head unit into here. And rule of thumb is if you see this black bar right here, you have to get the connector past that or the radio will not fit. And see, now it is in. Make sure that the little tabs are flush with the metal. And it's always best not to put in the screws until we've actually fitted this, because you may have to take it out, you know, a couple of times if you don't have enough slack. So now that we have the radio installed, the head unit's installed, we actually want to kind of dress this up. And the nice thing about the Mr. 12 volt kit is actually you can actually put an aftermarket front and rear camera on here, and that's what these are for. But for the time being, because we're not going to be using that, we're actually going to kind of wire tie this up to make it a little bit cleaner. Now these are not included in the kit, so you may want to source your own. And you want to leave slack here because this is actually used for wired Android Auto and Android Carplay. So, you know, when you put it in here, make sure that you can actually have access to this. And also, I think you can use it to update things within the the Mr. 12 volt. Okay, we cut these off. Okay, the nice thing about a Cayenne is there's actually a void right here. So we're going to be taking this box and feeding it into this void so it can't be seen. So I'm going to move the steering wheel out as far as it will go to give me more space in here. You can't put it under the steering wheel because it will actually impede the movement of the steering wheel for the height and length adjustment. Okay, so now that we're getting the Mr. 12 volt box in here, you take it and you put it in here, and like I said, there's a void in here. This box fits in here nice and neatly, and then you just kind of tuck the wires in here, like I said, leaving this so if you actually need it. Some people actually will run it down the side console, but if you have a current iPhone or Android, then you can actually just use the wireless function. And there you go. You can't see any of the wires now. And the next is so we're gonna put the 4 screws that hold it in, put the vents on, and then we can pair a phone to it. So now that we've got this, we pull this just out a little bit so we can get to this blue tape that we put in here to protect that. We push it back in, and we install the 4 screws. And I always do this in a diagonal fashion so that we'll seat the radio properly. Now we're going to proceed to put the vents back in. So we're going to start with the right vent and make sure that you remember to hook the wire back up to the vent. This helps the car know if the vents are open or closed. And they are keyed, so you can't put them on incorrectly. And gently put them back on until you hear click. All right, so now we need to reinstall the left side vent. And like I said, make sure that you plug it in before you install it. And like I said, it's keyed, so you can't put it in incorrectly. Feed the wire in there so it's not stuck in the vent, and then you pop it on and it clicks. So now you can remove this, and then if you did everything right, it will boot up to the Porsche logo, and then you'll see the Mr. 12 volt logo. All right, the next step is to pair the phone using Carplay. But the first thing you do before you do Carplay is you actually have to hook it up to Bluetooth. All right, on your iPhone, you actually go into the settings, press settings, go into Bluetooth, and then look for this Bluetooth device. This one is Mr. 12 volt _ BEAA, which it actually shows up right here. And you say pair, allow, and then it's going to ask you, do you want to allow CarPlay? And say use CarPlay. And as you can see, you have CarPlay. And that's all there is to it.
All right, so now the Cayenne has CarPlay, wireless Apple CarPlay. And all it costs was $500 and a good buddy's time. So find yourself a good buddy, or maybe some little tools and a headlamp so you can do it yourself. But leave a comment below if you have any questions on what we did or any comments, and come back and see us next time. Thanks, Tom.